Hello again. This is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today. Let's chalk another one up for the not hitting the record button this time. Man, gotta not get so into that media, Ben. All right. Seriously, it's a comedy affairs over here. We've got some footage from Jill Underly, and I wish I could say I was live reacting. That's why I'm making such a big deal out of it, but I'm like secondarily live reacting because I just watched it and recorded the whole video for your the amusement of the ants here. So that I don't feel like ants, including spider, just like insects in general, are not what one hopes for. They just don't give you the feedback that you need for a successful audience, unlike a lens. You see what I'm saying? Okay. I think I'm out of jokes for the particular moment, but boy, was that frustrating here. Channel 12, WISN Milwaukee, has an interview here with Dr. Jill Underly. Questions we got to ask yourself: why is she coming out now? Why are they having her answer these questions now? She could obviously just not. What's the political purpose behind her appearing here? And do we believe what she says? I think that's the main thing. Oh, and does I think we're going to get into a question here, which is this is something that everybody should be concerned about here in the state of Wisconsin. We are what they call local control state. And that ultimately means that if DPI gets in trouble, they can just say, well, it's the district's fault. That's generally what that means. And the districts, though, are not being controlled by the school board members, which that is what is supposed to be. That's the concept here. That's what the whole legal framework is based on. But in fact, it's the insurance companies, the attorneys, and the Wisconsin Association of School Boards that are really what we call local control here in Wisconsin. So let's keep it going.
Welcome back. It's been a chaotic few weeks within Milwaukee Public Schools, the largest school district in the state, and now the impacts are rippling across the state. The revelations of major financial mistakes led to the superintendent resigning, and now the district could lose up to $50 million in state aid for the next school year. Beyond that, state education officials withheld nearly $17 million for failing to submit financial reports in time. Now it appears that money will soon be released. With that, let's bring in Dr. Jill Underly, the Wisconsin State Superintendent of the Department of Public Instruction. Dr. Underly, welcome back to UpFront.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Let's start with that nearly $17 million that was withheld. When will Milwaukee Public Schools get that money?
Yeah, so they'll get it as soon as they meet the terms of the corrective action plan. So we anticipate that will be relatively soon.
So that money there's two kinds of money that we're talking about. Number one, there's some programs that money, this is a $16 million, whatever, has been withheld temporarily, but as soon as they get their paperwork in order, then they're fine, okay? So that to me does not seem, that seems like smokescreen. That seems like a fake punishment here. You know, in other words, a sternly worded letter followed up by another sternly worded letter. I am thinking, though, about there's another pool of money that they're talking about, which is the state aid that starts on July 1st, and that aid is based on whatever was spent the year before, and they're basically saying, I think that some $40 million was improperly spent or something like that, and it's going to be withheld, meaning the next amount of aid is not going to reflect the thing that shouldn't have been spent or that was supposedly spent improperly. That's what I am getting from these two distinct amounts. I've gone back and forth in understanding it. So thanks with bearing with my mumbling explanation.
Even though they accept the terms, if they accept the terms of that CAP, you have put some contingencies on it.
Yeah, so we're going to be closely monitoring the different regulations. I mean, we are a compliance agency, and so we want to make sure that they are following the rules.
The latest estimate from DPI is that MPS will lose between 30.
But let's hold on. Okay, so because throughout this whole interview, it's going to be hard to reconcile the fact that we know that they were meeting with them weekly as of 2021. So we have to keep that in mind when ever we're talking about this because the story doesn't add up otherwise.
$35 and $50 million next school year in state aid because of these accounting errors. Has that number increased at all as you continue to look into this?
Well, the estimate right now is between 35 and 45 million, so we're not quite sure. And I just want to be clear, they didn't lose the money; they got the money last year. It's just going to be withheld as we balance things out for the next school year and fix the accounting errors.
And when do you anticipate to know for sure what that dollar amount will be?
Well, the July 1 aid is when that'll happen.
DPI has said that it first became aware of all of these mistakes in March.
This
that
is the
still
question
accurate?
she's been waiting
Yeah,
for.
we didn't know quite then even how bad it was. Like I said before, submitting reports late was not unusual. School districts do that, and then when that happens, we certainly, help them out. Technical assistance, we reach out. We found more or less in late April when we were meeting with them that things were worse than we had expected. So we stepped up the meetings with them to be daily.
So something changed in April that had not been the case since 2021. That's the key thing you need to keep in mind. Because we know that there had been an active task force formed, which I think had been going on since 2019. That DPI and MPS met to get rid of MPS's chronic deficiencies and tardiness on a weekly basis since at least 2021. So for her to sit there and say that all of a sudden something changed and we just found out, but she's not going to tell us what they found out that was different or anything else, is kind of hard to swallow.
When we realized they were not making any progress on meeting those reporting goals, that's when we had taken that extraordinary step to notify their school.
That's where we're at. So they're saying, look, something happened, but it didn't happen until after the referendum, that we came to the conclusion that they weren't making sufficient progress to meeting their reporting goals. So we stopped believing that. We believed that they would get there for 5-6 years, but all of a sudden, the moment that this referendum passed, then we stopped believing that. That's what I just heard.
Board on May 24th.
MPS was meeting with DPI weekly
Yeah,
as
look
of
at
March
that.
15th.
I'm sorry.
And
To be daily. When we realized they were not making any progress on meeting those reporting goals, that's when we had taken that extraordinary step to notify their school board on May 24th.
MPS was meeting with
Yeah, look
DPI
at
weekly as of March 15th and then daily. So that was before voters approved the referendum in April. DPI knew in March that these issues were evident.
Well, no, not necessarily. Like I said, we didn't know how bad things were. And as I said prior, for example, last year they submitted reports late. The last time in 23, they submitted their reports in late March as well as mid-April. So there was really no reason for us to believe that they were not going to submit the report.
April, May, is that any different? Late April, is that any different? Really? Okay, so this is, again, what's different about this year than all other years? Could it be a election? I couldn't say.
Reports in 2024.
The governor in part pointed the finger at DPI. I want to play a little bit of what he told Matt just this past week. Take a listen.
What responsibility does DPI
Well, then
have in
that's
this?
what
It
this
seems
is
like
about.
They knew about a lot of this before it became
Well,
public.
okay. So then, in my opinion, this is what's known as a limited hangout. That's a CIA term where they you give some of the truth out there. You are trying to deflect from the larger issue of what's going on here, the larger problem. So first they went after Keith Posley and try to blame everything on him. I don't get the sense that they feel that that's working here, partially because, again, why is Jill Underly on television sort of sitting there all hang-faced like that, taking this from the governor? She doesn't have to. They just happen to be politically allied. So that's also another situation. It does seem like nobody's really buying that DPI didn't know that, and now all of a sudden they've got I mean, they're literally asking the question that we've been asking and pointing the finger to, and saying, hey, here's the, I mean, literally, maybe not many people watch our show, but maybe they don't. And, you know, I don't, who cares if it is or if it isn't, but I will put it like this. Surprisingly, she gets on camera the moment that a couple of days after we start talking about what DPI knew and when did it know it. So, you know, nothing like getting a counter narrative out there going. But also, it seems like they kind of had this concept that the DPI was going to have to do some splaining. It's very possible that DPI got a lot of public records requests in the past couple of weeks that they probably didn't want to answer. So I can see all of that. But to have this kind of setup here with Tony Evers, the governor, and there again, constitutionally speaking, you got to be clear, she is not a cabinet member working for him, even though she's a state of Wisconsin administrator or secretary. She's independently elected by the citizens of the state of Wisconsin. So it could be the case that she was a political opponent to him. It's also the case, though, that she is his direct successor, that Tony Evers had that position before. That's how he springboarded himself into national fame. He spoke at my law school graduation. There's a lot of great things about Tony Evers. I definitely like the guy in many respects. But he is ultimately responsible for the administration of the state of Wisconsin, and I've got some issues with that.
Like for weeks, even months.
Well, I would think if there's any concern I have, and I'm obviously supportive of the DPI, but to allow it to happen at this point in time without notifying the school board or others, I think that was.
Oh, look, I like the or others.
On DPI's part.
Absolutely. They need to keep people informed.
Why didn't DPI make this known before voters approved a $252 million referendum?
Yeah, so we're focused on getting MPS back into compliance, and we have not interfered in referendums in the past. So I can't imagine if DPI started weighing in on local school district referendums, what repercussions that would have, how school boards would feel about that, how superintendents would feel about that. And so we really rely as a local control state for that relationship between the superintendent and the board to keep each other in.
Okay, well, it's going to be a bunch of things. Number one, local control, as we discussed before. I think that really means insurance company and WASB control. I don't think that the school board members are really, on a larger level in control of what's going on here. I also think that, and notice that we didn't hear her say anything, because the question ultimately is, why didn't you tell the voters before the referendum that there was all these problems that you knew about, that you admit that you knew about? Why didn't you tell us about that? Why are we now paying, hundreds of dollars more a year in property taxes but you didn't tell us? Why are you not responsible for doing that? And in fact, Tony Evers certainly, and others, and I don't know if we can pin it on, but they were supportive of the referendum, because that's what she's saying. She's coming out in favor of all referendums regardless. I'm generally in favor of all referendums for schools regardless. I mean, I think if you're going to waste a bunch of money, you might as well waste it on a school district, rather than all sorts of other government waste. No question about it. As long as the school district has good outcomes and isn't primarily focused on retaliating against employees and parents who speak out. That's the kind of the distinction that I like to make there. All right. I've been recording for so long today that the camera shut down twice. All right. Let's rock and roll.
Formed.
MPS leaders knew about this in March. DPI knew about this in March.
I'm sorry.
I know that you say that you didn't.
We got to listen to that whole thing again, because does she ever talk about the voters? No, she talks about, and it's very clear who her constituents are. It's not the people, and she's voted. This is very strange. But when we call the regulatory, her agency is captured by the school boards and the superintendents. That's who they work for. They don't work for the teachers, they don't work for the pupils, and they don't work for the parents. That's my accusation there. And she doesn't seem to care a whit about either the pupils, parents, or the voters. And certainly I haven't heard her mention teachers once.
Realize how bad of an issue it was, but there was a massive campaign asking taxpayers
Informed.
why didn't DPI make this known before voters approved a $252 million referendum?
Yeah, so we're focused on getting MPS back into compliance, and we have not interfered in referendums in the past. So I can't imagine if DPI started weighing in on local school district referendums, what repercussions that would have.
They knew,
how
she's,
school boards would feel about that, how superintendents would feel about that, and so we really
how voters would feel about that, how parents, how pupils, how teachers might feel about it. Let's not forget that, Jill Underly. That's kind of disappointing there. She is point blank admitting that they knew about this before the referendum, but they made a conscious choice not to say anything. That's what I'm hearing there.
rely as a local control state for that relationship between the superintendent and the board to keep each other informed.
MPS leaders knew about this in March. DPI knew about this in March. I know that you say that you didn't realize how bad of an issue it was, but there was a massive campaign asking taxpayers to pass this referendum, $252 million. There was
Mandela
never any
bars,
mention
for
that
example.
MPS had been late from MPS officials or DPI. Do you think that that was disingenuous to taxpayers?
Well, not at all necessarily, because a referendum is there to help the school district be able to provide programs for kids. We have to do what's best for kids, and passing a referendum is what's best for kids in most and many all situations.
Even if that money is needed only because of their...
If that's the mentality, then what incentive does any administration have not to defraud and steal with both hands? Not saying that anybody is or isn't, but then because they know that they'll get bailed out by referendum, and that DPI will support it because they support all referendums, and they won't alert people to what they know is going on. Superintendents are watching this. They know.
own errors on keeping the finances together?
Well, I guess it would just necessarily depend. When I look at a referendum, that's to keep programs going. That's to pay your teachers. That's certainly to make
she
sure all
mentioned
kids
teachers.
can read. It's a lot of different things
Now
that
she's
are
mentioning
outside of financial problems.
Could they have been able to pay teachers and keep kids in the classrooms by keeping their finances in order?
The thing is, it's like we pushed.
Okay. That's not a gotcha question by any sense of the imagination. That's the crux of the issue, and she should have answered it. And you got that sort of disdainful bureaucrat, Let's do that again.
It's a lot of different things that are outside of financial problems.
Could they have been able to pay teachers and keep kids in the classrooms by keeping their finances in order?
How dare you ask me that, peasant?
The thing is, it's like we pushed to make this public, all right? And when it comes to financial reporting and
Well, because that phrase there means when they pushed, that would have happened before they actually made it public. So the question is who did they have to push, and why did it take so long for them to push through them to be able to say something? Because that sounds like she's coordinating with the board, Tony Evers, and etc., public records watchers out there, to not put this data out there. That's what it sounded like to me. Listen again.
By keeping their finances in order?
We pushed. Peasant.
the thing is, it's like we pushed to make this public, all right? And when it comes to financial reporting and it comes to
Because that's your basic liberal, well, I know things are terrible and I didn't have, but I tried. So how dare you say anything to me because I tried? You should have recognized that I tried, and it's outrageous that you didn't. That mentality presupposes that they're elites to begin with. It's what the heck?
to
Do your
how
job.
the community is informed, we can do better. And we are looking at ways to make that more transparent. But as it is right now, that
Oh.
is something that is between the superintendent.
Maybe they're going to start allowing people to speak at school board meetings. Sorry, that's transparent. They got that from straight up from Jilly Gokul Gandhi. I mean, it's the same. What ways do you need to find to make things more transparent? You just admitted that you made a conscious decisions not to make things transparent. Well, we found it. It's found. It's discovered. Fact ahoy. It's not a mystery. We don't need a process, a committee, anything else. You just admitted it. You withheld the information on purpose because you didn't want to interfere in a referendum because of how would school districts and how would superintendents feel about it. We don't care about necessarily the inclusion of one is the exclusion of the other. Voters, teachers, pupils.
In the school board and their community.
Dr. Jill Underly, the State Superintendent of the Department of Public Instruction, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Bam. Channel 12, WISN and company. Thank you for that. But wow, that was something else. That was possibly an admission against interest there. I don't think that limited hangout really did them any favors there. I don't know who's consulting her, but geez, Louise, people, try not to say it out loud that you withheld the information from the voters on purpose. So stick with us. We'll keep you informed.